quite some time, going back to the days when Stephen was a columnist there in Philadelphia, when Kobe was a star coming out of Lower Merion High School. Stephen A., how are you processing this information right now, brother?
It's just devastating. Obviously, I found out a few minutes after the reports came out, and it's a guy I've known for his entire career, and I've known him pretty well, and we've talked a lot and throughout the years, and knowing what a winner he was, not just on the basketball court but off of it, how inspirational he was, how motivational he was in terms of really helping to instill in other people, just the tenacity and the focus on being all that you could be, never taking any shortcuts, a willingness to put in the work, to rip yourself and shred yourself of the excuses of the things that hold you back from achieving the things that you aspire to achieve. It wasn't just about basketball with him. It was about life. And that Mamba mentality wasn't something that was reserved for just basketball players or for just athletes. It was for any human being out there who had a dream, who felt the need to be inspired about something, who wanted something so badly. It was about going out and getting it. And he was just that kind of guy. And he laughed a lot more than people realized. He told a lot of jokes more than people realized. He'd sting you whenever he could because that was his way. He was a guy that he was a great basketball player. He was a great father. He loved his wife, and that's obviously tremendously. He was a great friend. We were just together on New Year's Eve, and we were supposed to meet again in a few weeks to discuss some things and to just hear the news that he passed away, particularly in this fashion. He's been taking a helicopter for decades, living in Newport Beach and, flying, toward downtown to LA to the Staples Center, to and from games all the time for many, many years. He loved being in that helicopter. He certainly was never really concerned about it. And for him to be gone, particularly through these means, is incredibly tragic, and it's sad. And to know that his daughter was on a helicopter with him, it just resonated even that much more profoundly. So obviously it's incredibly sad for me, incredibly sad for the NBA community, and it's just hard to put it in words, to be quite honest with you. That's the best I can do.
Stephen A., Kobe Bryant's been a public figure for, more than 2 decades, as you mentioned. I mean, he took Brandy to high school prom, right? I mean, who got to do that? But Kobe Bryant did that. Then he comes into the NBA with the bravado of a 10-year veteran, even if he didn't have the skills at that time to match it. But then 5 NBA championships, an MVP, 2 gold medals at the Olympics. We've seen Kobe Bryant for quite some time. And from a fan standpoint, if you will, we feel like we do know who Kobe Bryant is, the relentless competitor, the never give up attitude. You mentioned some of the off-court things, his sense of humor. What is it about Kobe Bryant, Stephen A., that most people, frankly, don't know?
Well, I would tell you that, again, I use the word motivational because I think that a lot of times when people look at him and they take some of the words and some of the things that he spewed, they try to attach it to athletics, but he wasn't about that. He was about life. When I spoke at the University of Alabama for Nick Saban last year, Kobe had spoken prior to that, I think a year earlier than that. Anywhere he could go to inspire people to be the best that they can be, that was something that he wanted to do. He didn't want to just do it through his words, however. He wanted to continue to do it through his own work, to show that basketball was just one element of what he was all about. It certainly didn't limit him in any way. He spoke several languages fluently, obviously Italian, Spanish, and of course English. I mean, this guy was highly intellectual. He was a brilliant mind, and he was not shy about letting you know that he was brilliant because he never believed he was. He was on a mission to constantly elevate himself intellectually. That's just the temperament that he had. But he also wanted to be inspirational in that regard. I remember years ago when I had the show, quite frankly, on ESPN2, and people used to talk about me, interviewing people, and they used to bring up folks like Oprah and others. He used to say, damn all of that, not Oprah, Harpo. That was his mentality. Don't think about just being in front of the camera. Think about owning the product. Think about something bigger than what you're thinking about. constantly. It's not just about being a reporter. It's about being an author. It's not just about being a basketball player. It's about being a champion. It's not just about being an artist. It's about being an Academy Award winner. These are all things that he had visions of, and it was consistent with who he was from the time that you knew him. Because coming into the NBA, one of the things that had turned others off about him initially, he came into the league talking about how he was going to be as great, if not greater, than Michael Jordan one day. And people used to look at him and say, this dude is off of his rocker. His chest is sticking out just a little bit too much. He needs perspective. And then sure enough, when you watched him work and you saw the commitment that he put in, you realized he wasn't playing. He was dead serious. He would win championships. He would take a week or two off and then show back up a week or two later and start working in the summertime at 5:30 in the morning. This is what he did religiously. When other people were taking vacations, he was studying. When other people were taking breaks, he was working out. That was his entire mentality about anything and everything. And if you were going to be around him and you talked about aspiring to do something, one of the biggest things he would question you about was the work that you were putting in. He would probe, he would interrogate, because he wanted to make sure that you were doing what you said that you wanted to do, that you were, if you were truly aspiring to go after what you were aspiring to go after, he wanted to judge what you were doing for yourself to see how seriously he could take that you really meant what you said about really, really going for it. That was his mentality all of the time. And he was that way with teammates. He was that way with executives. He was that way with league officials. He was that way with contemporaries. He certainly was that way with me, along with a bevy of other people that he called friends or called one of his boys or whatever the case may be. That was his mentality. And all of that shaped Black Mamba, the Mamba mentality. You either had to adjust to the program or you didn't want to be around him because he wasn't going to change, because he knew he was right and you were probably wrong if you were against him.
Yeah, that work ethic was notorious for Kobe Bryant. I mean, he would show up to games or before practice, sometimes before shoot around, after going through a full workout and have to go change into dry clothes just so he could get ready for the practice or the shoot around before the game that night. That's how committed Kobe Bryant was. Steve, stand by, because we're getting more and more reaction from around the league on the death of Kobe Bryant in a helicopter crash outside of Los Angeles around 10 a.m. this morning there in L.A. Alvin Gentry and the Pelicans have a game coming up later this evening. He was asked to give his thoughts on Kobe passing away at the age of 41.
I mean, no words, really. I mean, I don't know where you could even start. I mean, great competitor, great guy, you know, a great father. Just really, really a sad day for the NBA. You know, obviously, thoughts and prayers go with his family, really, you know. And, I mean, they've lost, you know, one of the greatest players, but also a guy that's just, you know, his name is synonymous with that franchise. So, you know, it's just a tough day, you know, to hear of his passing, and, you know, one of his daughters, you know, it's just a real tragic thing.
Stephen A. Smith still with us here on SportsCenter. Alvin Gentry brought up a good point. Kobe wasn't just a marquee player, Stephen A. He also played for a marquee franchise. And that combination is so much a part of Kobe's legacy as well, because you played for an organization that had Elgin Baylor, had Jerry West, had Magic Johnson, had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, had Shaquille O'Neal. With all of that together, how would you describe what Kobe's legacy will be within the game itself?
Well, he's arguably the greatest Laker of all time. People have brought up Magic Johnson. They bring up him. It's one of the two. Obviously, you appreciate the greatness of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, 19-time All-Star, one of the greatest centers. But he was originally in Milwaukee before he came to L.A. Magic Johnson pretty much played his whole career in a Los Angeles Laker uniform. Kobe Bryant played all 20 years of his career in a Los Angeles Laker uniform. You ask Kobe who was the greatest Laker, he'll tell you Magic. You ask Magic who was the greatest Laker of all time, he'll tell you Kobe. Just that level of respect. He's in that conversation when you consider all the great ones that have donned a Los Angeles Laker uniform. And you also have to take into account the love that he had for the Lakers. Yeah, there were some rough times after the departure of Shaquille O'Neal, and then they struggled for a couple of years. And obviously, Kobe Bryant was incredibly frustrated. Came on my radio show back in 2007, if I remember correctly, and talked about how he'd rather play on the planet Pluto than stay in a Los Angeles Laker uniform. That's the only time in the 20-year career of Kobe Bryant that he had ever spoken against being a Laker because he was so disgruntled and disheartened by what was transpiring. Then all of a sudden they pull off a trade. They end up moving Kwame Brown and others out. They acquire Pau Gasol. They go to 3 straight NBA finals. They win back-to-back titles in 2009, 2010, and all that noise had dissipated. If there was ever a time that he was going to leave, whether it would be to be a Clipper or to be a Chicago Bull, it was going to be during that one period of time that he was upset with what was transpiring with the Los Angeles Lakers. But that was the only time that it was ever an option for him to be anything other than a Laker. He loved the purple and gold. He loved representing Laker Nation, and he loved living up to the tradition of excellence that the Los Angeles Lakers had put forth as one of the storied franchises in the history of sports. He took pride in that. He took pride in being a marquee. He took pride in being the headliner and showing up to city, state to state, and basically highlighting for everybody that he wasn't just a superstar basketball player. He was a marquee who was willing to accept the responsibility that came along with being a marquee. That means putting in the work, accepting the challenge, embracing the challenges that came along with being that dude. That's what he wanted. That's what he lived for. And that's how he went about the business of performing every single day of his career.
Yeah, Kobe and the Lakers, it's hard to separate the two of them in the city of Los Angeles as well, mourning, obviously, the loss of Kobe Bryant. Stephen A. Smith sharing his thoughts and perspectives here. More from Stephen A. throughout the evening.